This is It's Gonna Be Okay with Dr. Roseann, and today we're diving into a really hot topic. How to increase motivation in kids with attention problems. Maybe they have ADHD, maybe they're AUDHD, maybe they don't have a clinical diagnosis, but having kids who are unmotivated is probably one of the greatest things that everybody wants to talk to me about because we're living in a world of technology. Sometimes it's hard to get our kids off devices, but it's all about self regulation. So let's dive in. And first, we're going to talk about the link between attention, executive functioning, and motivation, right? So just because your kid doesn't have a clinical diagnosis doesn't mean they have good executive functioning. And we're living in a world of sort of immediacy, right? I want to be stimulated. I don't want to be bored. And, when we grew up, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, rotary phones, right? Of course. But we had to occupy our time differently. We didn't have I grew up in a time when cable was just starting. Of course, my dad put a lock on it because he didn't want us to see boobies on TV. Not that we didn't have them, but it was just a different time, right? And we're not going back to that time. Sometimes we mourn that. I do feel sorry for kids today where everything is captured. And Dr. Rowe wouldn't have been able to go and get her doctorate because I was having a good old time. But we're talking about motivation and executive functioning and attention. And when it comes to executive functioning, just to understand what it is, it's a job manager of the brain. It is really our problem solution oriented future thinking component of our brain. It tells all the other parts like, hey, you got a test tomorrow. Uh, did you study? Did you go over the questions? Are you ready? And if you didn't, when are you going to do it? How is it going to look like? And it really is something that was is within us. For those of us that are good at executive functioning, this girl, not good at math, but I'm good at executive functioning. It's really how you future think. You see in results, you see in end products. And kids with ADHD, kids with low motivation, don't see the end result. And there is this intricate relationship between the two. And know that you can have executive functioning challenges without an ADD diagnosis or autism diagnosis or whatnot. But if you have clinical mental health issues, executive functioning can be one of the things that break down. So let's talk about ways to really sort of build those things that scaffold motivation, right? And if you have a child with pathological demand avoidance, they are some of the most low motivation kids out there. I actually see a kid in counseling with pathological demand avoidance, and it's a challenge. And I have to really break things down. I'm going to show you some of the things that I actually do because these are the tips, right? So when they have issues, right? What's the difference between lack of interest and attention difficulties, right? So I think some kids always, struggle with boredom, right? And what can I do, right? You take away their device. What can I do? And we all went through this in the pandemic, and I was on TV talking about it all the time. And, it's really about having things out for kids, letting them know. And one of the first things that is so important for kids, and I really, really very much believe in this, and I do this for myself, routines, visual schedules. We think our kids are bright. Maybe they are a rock star in math or a great reader. And we think that just automatically translates into whatever area you want them to be motivated in. Like, I had to tell my kids today 5 times to go get the garbage cans. That's not really typical, but was a day with no schedule. He really benefits from routines and schedules. If I had put a sticky note on his desk, he would have did it quicker, right? So I was not clear in my expectations for him. Of course, I threatened to turn off the Wi-Fi. That was really what was going to happen. But it's a holiday day and it's okay. This isn't a norm, right? When there is really a problem, right? There has to be a consistency to it. All kids struggle with motivation at different times, but when it really is something that's a friction point between you, you really have to look, is there something else going on behind it? And did you have clear expectations, instructions? Did you set clear goals, right? Today, perfect example. I wasn't clear, right? Also, Mr. Hatch wasn't clear. He sent me a text and told me that JC, John Carl, had to go and get the garbage cans. It was off routine for all of us. So, was I clear, right? Now, when something is truly a routine, why don't you have a visual schedule? I don't care if your kid is 17, 23, or 3. People benefit from visuals, right? We do. And then when it comes to executive functioning, right? We don't wanna over focus on the steps to it. It's one of the worst things teachers and schools do. We have to really say, what's the end result? Oh, what does it look like when the garbage cans are, next to you? If you have a teenager, it might tell you to F off. But when we start and we do these things over time, our kids get used to it. You have to activate the visual parts of their brain. You have to gesture. You really have to help kids to see the end result, or often they give up. They're like, "I don't know." And sometimes that's the biggest friction point, and this is really a therapist hack. This is what we do in therapy when we're teaching executive function. We're working with low motivation kids. Make it visual, have clear expectations. I see mismatched expectations between parents and kids of all ages, from young adults all the way down, right? We do a lot of work with people in their 20s, and it really is mismatched expectations, right? What you think is clear isn't clear to them. And so they just avoid, especially when there's a lot of friction. So, kids with clinical issues, mental health issues, how about all kids? They do best with interactive hands-on learning. So, if there's something that's a family priority for you, I worked with a family this week, and dinner was really a family priority for them. And they were frustrated that it wasn't a priority for their kid who has some pretty heavy duty clinical mental health issues. So, you know, having a conversation about it, but also making sure that they understood maybe they need to participate in the meal prep, right? Because that's hands-on instead of screaming at them, to come down. What can we do to make it interactive, hands-on, and what can we do to reinforce and reward? I know rewarding, gosh, some parents get real bent out of shape with rewards, but, when you really struggle with executive functioning, attention, sustaining your attention on non-preferred activities, I think it's always mind-blowing when parents are like, I had a mom yesterday, she was so great. I've never really had somebody say this. She was like, "I don't know how to say this, but what does focus really mean?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "Well, she can focus when she wants to, when it's something interesting." And I was like, I never really had somebody ask me it in that way. And really, it's about when it's stimulating, she can focus. And she was like, yes. And then she doesn't want to do what she doesn't want to do. Transitioning is hard. And this is a super bright, very capable kid. And she was perplexed by it. And it's really about, what is the brain self reinforcing, high interest? And when it's low reinforcement, when it's not exciting, we do have to provide reinforcement. Again, you have to prioritize your tasks. What are the things that are really important? It doesn't mean you say, oh, well, they can't do that. I'm just not even going to do. No, of course, right? Like, I'm a mother of a dyslexic. If I said, oh, well, he's a dyslexic, he can't read, he wouldn't be reading. Now he's above grade level, right? But we do have to really be clear about what it is. We have to let our kids know. We do have to make it visual, and we do have to prioritize the things that are the most important, right? So, one of the things that it's happening to kids is they're just not getting enough physical activity. And when it comes to kids, whether it's motivation for learning, whether it's motivation for getting the garbage cans, kids need breaks, movement, and sensory activities, right? So, our all of our neurodivergents tend to have sensory processing issues. My kids with PANS and PANDAS have sensory issues. That's why it's in our COM PMF device. And we need to give that to them, right? We can't just have kids, sitting at their desks or watching TV or, right? We're just a very sedentary society. We need movement. Movement gets oxygen to the frontal lobes. It's been clinically proven to dramatically improve attention. If you listen to the previous episode, there was a survey done that said it was the number one thing that helped kids pay attention in a survey done by Chad Attitude Magazine. And what previous research has shown is that as little as 3 times a week, 30 minutes of exercise, vigorous exercise, reduces attention problems by 40%. So some of that's sensory, some of that's just getting the lymphs going, getting oxygen to the frontal lobes, but it really can be a game changer. So I want you to think about that. Don't think your kid's coming off their device after 3 hours and they're going to be like really excited to do more work or do the laundry or whatever it is, right? So now when we're picking activities, right? We want to help our kids be autonomous. I think one of the things I talk about bubble wrap parenting, we're not letting our kids do things on their own and make failure. And failure is awesome. Right? And we're like, "Oh, I don't want them to be upset." But when we don't let our kids experience stress, they don't have grit, they don't have resilience, and they will avoid things that make them uncomfortable. So we may be thinking it's low motivation when it's actually anxious avoidance. And it's super important to help them build self-regulation skills and coping skills. Dysregulated nervous system can show up in many different ways. And we wanna let our kids with bumpers be more autonomous, right? I started off by, talking about growing up in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And, we were like a motley crew and we just did stuff. And kids today, it's not going back to that, but it's gone to the extreme. We are not letting our kids experience failures so they can problem solve, build resilience, and take risks, right? And this is not just valuable for them today, it's really valuable for them in the future in all aspects of their life. But kids need coping skills in order to have good mental health. If you're always rescuing them, they're going to avoid things. And that can be misinterpreted again as low motivation. So I hope this was an enlightening conversation because, again, motivation and lack of it is one of the top frustrating things that parents talk to me about. And you're going to pick one of these things, you're going to start integrating them into your routine and be consistent. Nothing happens without consistency. The brain is not going to alert to it. Now, if you're looking for solutions, you are still frustrated, you're trying these things, you are really concerned about the direction your child is going, you're going to take our solution matcher, right? People fly in all over the world to see me because I'm just a strategist and I am pulling and using things that science shows us that works. So go to drroseann.com/help, take your solution matcher because wherever you are in that journey, it's going to guide you to the right solution for you, your child, your family, no matter where you're at. And you're going to get awesome resources all the time. So, sending all my mamas, papas, caregivers, and even the teachers that listen a lot of love. You're doing awesome. It's going to be okay. And you know that you just need to take the steps towards the solutions.